Good afternoon. This is the last panel of the series Meetings on Art, fostered by La Biennale di Venezia, which also included discussions about indigenous art, arte popular, modernisms, and today, queer activisms. I am Leandro Muniz, assistant curator at Museu de Arte de São Paulo, and also artist and MA candidate in art history from the University of São Paulo. And first of all, I'd like to thank Adriano Pedrosa, Amanda Carneiro, Sofia Gotti, Laria Zanella, and the whole team of the Biennale for inviting me and to mediate this talk, and for the warm welcome and preparation. I would also like to thank the speakers of this panel, Lucy Delir, Gian Andich, Asia Lehmann, and Burak Sengeler from Transpride Exhibition Collective, Vabeni Elikenfiachi, Maria Zuraik from Queers in Palestine will join us virtually because she had some unforeseen issues during her displacement. And finally, I'd like to thank all of you for your presence here today and your interest in such pressing debate. Well, the main subject of this panel is queer activisms, and we have here people from different backgrounds and practices. However, they all work with connected aims and impulses regarding freeing queer people from acts of violence, expectations and constraints socially reproduced, eventually internalized in subjective structures, and in more perverse cases, in juridic and legal apparatus. For us, as queer people, it is effortless to recall the first moments when our behaviors and desires didn't fit the implicit or explicit social rules that govern gender performances and the power relations in them. In this sense, we know that moving in a certain way, dressing in a certain way, or talking in a certain way can be so freeing and community-creating as a risk that may return as linguistic, aesthetic, psychological, or even physical violence. Considering that, not only the difference between biological sexes, gender performances, or sexual orientations are desautomatized, so to speak, when we think about queer experience, but also several instances of life that may be considered apart, but are intrinsically connected and self-determining, such as public and private spheres, subjective and collective, personal or jurisdictional, that are brought together in a single dynamic in which these instances are not antagonistic. I'm referring here, for example, to laws of marriage that forbid gay people to get together, for example. In this sense, the art spaces play a very significant role in this discussion. Because when we usually raised when talking about historically oppressed groups, and I must say here, I don't like the idea of minority because it naturalizes white cis-hetero behaviors, is the very question of visibility and representation. Two issues intrinsically connected to history of art and the power relations that organize it. In this sense, this panel aims to raise other models of discussion of the queer contribution to the artistic and social practices in the present, regarding as well the conflicts and contradictions we might face nowadays. For example, just being invited to talk about our queer experiences without the chance to participate in other decisive positions. And beyond representation, to quote one text that Lucy Delir will present tonight, even though the preservation of memory is one of our goals, we can think about different forms of expressing queer sensibilities and how they could change the criteria and methodologies for the construction of knowledge and art. How do we negotiate participation in structures that may not be fulfilling as they could, but that works as a means for long-term possibilities? How to preserve the memory of violence without reproducing it, and using it as a tool to remember advances and think about spaces that still can be opened. How to move in a system of constrained visibility as another means of tactical survival. And especially, how can we escape the systems of race and gender that mark us socially to control, in the end, our life possibilities? These are some of the questions I hope to hear from my colleagues throughout their presentations. And above all, I think we are here to think about the preservation of memory to pavement other futures, remembering advancements, but also struggles and issues yet to be solved, and how we can share different sensibilities that change not only forms of sociality, but cognitive, methodological, aesthetic, and epistemological structures. So I invite here the first participant of this talk. Lucy Delia is a philosopher that publishes on the metaphysics of infinity, but also art, queer theory, anti-racism, post-colonialism, and political theory. So, Lucy, please.
Thank you so much for this generous introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, dear kings and queens and queers and children and everybody else who's here, I welcome you to this little talk by me. My name is Luce Delia. I'm a philosopher, and my talk today is called Beyond Representational Justice, Shadow Democracies and the Politics of Euphoria. What I'm attempting to do in this talk is to present you with two concepts in the beginning, which is shadow democracies and what I call representational justice, which is intricately related to why I'm here. So I'm going to do a little bit of storytelling. Then I'm going to try and see how representational justice plays out at the actual Venice Biennial 2024 exhibition. And then I'm going to try and tell you a little bit about epistemic violence, what I call the transsexual contract, and hospitality. So that's the trajectory, so to speak, just so you know where you are at, or not know anything. Probably you don't know anything now, but I hope I confused you a little bit, because that's going to jiggle things up a bit for you. Okay, let's start. So in 2023, I co-edited a collected volume of German art journal Texte zur Kunst, called Trans Perspectives, with only texts of trans artists or trans theorists about trans art, which was a first for this kind of journal. And in that volume, I myself published a text that's called Beyond Representational Justice, in which I try to argue as follows. I give you an updated version of representational justice. So my impression is that we're living in a time of all-encompassing, or even ever more and more encompassing commodification. So capitalism has taken a much, much deeper hold on our life worlds than we usually like to admit. And one of these symptoms of this is representational justice. So what is representational justice? Representational justice is an idea that justice is reached if representation of all the different diverse bodies and identities is equal. Okay, so we basically commodify on identities and people by virtue of putting them into little boxes, and then we apply a quantitative measure, which is basically more is more. So more representation of more different people is better, and once we reached equal representation of everybody, so all the queer, black, disabled, etc., artists in the big shows, everything will be fine. Now, the thing is that representational justice works in a way in a society that is a disciplinary society. A disciplinary society works by way of saying either you do what I tell you or I break your face. So disciplinary societies usually threaten you with immediate violence for transgression of norms. But Western societies currently are not necessarily these kinds of societies. Oftentimes, Western societies say, if you transgress the norms, you're fine if we can exploit you. All right? So transgress all the norms, but we will sell you binders, hormones, lube, vibrators, anal vibrators, etc., etc. So here, the transgression is not a means or an incentive for violence anymore, but an incentive for exploitation. So, but if transgression doesn't cause violence anymore, then representation also is just another means of exploitation. All right, so you see how like a certain change in the way in which social management operates, from violence to exploitation, also changes the way in which representation works. And that is why the commodified version of justice, representational justice, doesn't work. I just like throw out another term here. To my mind, like representational justice is a symptom of a wider phenomenon, which I call shadow democracies, where like, democracies get increasingly commodified. We can talk about it maybe in the Q&A a little bit. Which changes the vectors or like the axes on which we also have to like direct our artistic and political interventions. Okay, so I published this, and Venice Biennial was so nice to basically buy the text and republish it in their catalog. This is me receiving the catalog, being very happy and looking very tired. Here, this is the essay in the actual catalog, Beyond Representational Justice. So I thought maybe we could look at what happened. So apparently, Venice Biennial curators read the article, quoted it, republished it. So let's see how it plays out in the thing. And unmistakably, of course, there are instances of representational justice also in Venice, in the Venice Biennial exhibition. To my mind, this is an example by Sabelo Melaglini, Black Men in Dress. Which are images taken at Johannesburg Pride, and I forget the other one because I'm nervous. I am not nervous. But the point is, and that was my point in like the original article, Beyond Representational Justice as well, especially if you display trans people, for example, if you display trans women, you have a certain indeterminacy in this kind of representation, because it's unclear whether you look at these images and think, freaks, or if you look at these images and think, such an amazing display of gender transgression and appropriation of their own identity. Both are possible. So in the original article, what I tried to say was that like, if the curatorial work doesn't interfere or like intervene into the subject position that looks at the pieces, so like, like you look at this image and you bring your fantasies, projections, whatever other kind of stuff, and if I am a heterosexual, cisgender, white, normie, transphobe, then I can look at these images and think, ugh. But if I'm a college-educated, wonderful, like queero person from wherever, I can think, yay. All right. So like this indeterminacy is really the problem, I think, that like artistically and curatorially we have to work with. And the Biennial does work with it in a very, very interesting way in this section of the exhibit, and where I think the curatorial intervention is really on point and really really forward-looking, and I want to present this to you for a second. So we have like a whole collection of pieces here. The one is Avarami art project Diaspora from 2024, which is a collective made up of cis people and trans people, but like working explicitly with like representation of trans women. But what's interesting, I think, here, in the particular way in which this is curated, this is like wonderful mural with colors, with like really stunning colors. But you have these like 3 giant columns in front of it. So you can never actually fully see the mural, right? So like, although the representation, the self-representation is there, as an audience, you can't see it. Keep that in mind. So this is another piece, like in the same group, so to speak, Puppies, Electric Dress from 2023. And here you have a very similar effect. So the dress functions as a memorial of sorts for the shooting at Orlando in 2016 at the Latin night party, queer nightclub, where many people died. But if you look at the picture that I took here, I'm not good at taking pictures, but still, if you look at the picture that I took here, you will not see the piece. Actually, if you stand in front of the piece is going to be so radiatingly, loudly bright that you can't see the piece. All right? So like your patina, your eye itself, cannot represent the actual piece because it's just too bright. And like the photograph represents that by not representing it. Okay? So just as in the Avrami art project, the columns block your view, here it's your eye and the intensity of the light, in a way, that blocks the view. Okay. There's a third piece in the mix, which is Erica Rutherford's series of paintings, but I just picked one, The Diver. This is a trans woman painter who here paints herself as a diver, and there is, and Eric Prosser, Jay Prosser, says about this piece, or like about this series of pieces, that she paints herself as the woman that she would like to be. But as a trans woman, looking at these paintings, I'm thinking, if I was a trans woman and I wanted to paint myself as I wanted to be, I would probably paint myself with a face. These pieces all don't have faces. And now, for trans women, faces are a particular issue because I would say, partially because the poisoning of your body with testosterone in the young and fragile ages changes your bone structure in a certain way that is hard to undo. So it seems to me that it makes sense that she would blank out, as it were, this like very peculiar and very hard to change part of her self-representation, which, however, is, of course, probably the socially most important part of your presentation. So in, like in discourse about transness, oftentimes people are really obsessed with genitals, but to be fair, it's not that many people actually checking your genitals. It's much more, like the situation that happens much more frequently is that people look into your face and determine your gender. It's easier to like hide your genitals than to hide your face. And my impression is she appropriates this here by just hiding her face to begin with. You can't tell. All right, so we have this like third piece in this group of pieces, which blocks representation. All right, which like actively prevents you from seeing what you might or might not want to see. The last piece in this series that I want to briefly mention is Lyndon Johnson's, for example, Collect the Water just to see it pool there above your head. Don't be a fucking hero. So this is an interesting piece. Do I have it here? No. This is an interesting piece because it's hung very high. And the first time I came to Venice to see the Biennial in August, I spent 20 to 30 minutes sitting around in that area just to see who sees this piece, and I think it's like 5% of the audience. Most people will not look up and see this piece. Additionally, of course, it's a complicated piece. It's a piece of cowhide that is allegedly, it says the title, meant to collect water. But it does, in a way, like appeal to us to reflect on our own position instead of like trying to like be outward and like be a hero and present something cool and great and amazing. All right. So again, looking back at this like little group here, so again we have another piece here which resists representation. All right. But this time by appropriating the corporeality of another species, a cow, and appealing to you as the audience to like not step up and be the hero, not represent something that is usually thought to be a protector and something that like saves other people, which we will talk about in a second, but to reflect on yourself. So not trying to like represent, but be present with yourself. So all of these pieces, in a way, in this little group, give an alternative approach, is my suggestion, to representational justice, which you might call unpresentation. All right? They all work with gender and sexuality. They all present or like represent gender diverse or like diverse sexualities, but they do so in a way that doesn't give you what you want. If you want to like see a person or like a story or an identity or something like that, what they say is, there's nothing to see here, and that's what you're meant to see. Why is this interesting? I think this is interesting because I would say trans people in particular, and queer people on a wider scale probably also find themselves in the condition of epistemic violence. So I take this term from Gayatri Chakravorty-Spivak, and I understand epistemic violence as a condition in which all your possible ways to understand yourself and what you do and what you want and what you desire is actually constituted by an order that wants to destroy you, or that wants to harm you, or that wants to control you, or that wants to oppress you. So you can only be, as it were, the distorted image of your oppressor. All right? So this is not just an inaccessibility of self-understanding with a little distortion, but this is but here the condition is everything that you have at your disposal is actually hostile to you. All right? And my suggestion is that this is the condition, especially of trans people. I'm going to illustrate this with what I call the transsexual contract. Usually, traditionally, the idea in disciplinary societies about trans people was trans people are sick people and they should not exist. And if they exist, if they are supposed to like be able to change their name and their gender, for example, we also want to sterilize them. We want to prevent them from having children. We want to prevent them from like having normal lives and these kinds of things. We will provide them with narratives about themselves, like being wrong and being born in the wrong body, or like having a pathological disease and stuff like that. So we provide them with narratives which are actually harmful to them. And what trans people can do in a way is only appropriate and distort and these narratives and make them their own. All right, so this is a condition, I say, of epistemic violence, where everything that you have at your disposal doesn't come to you as something nice and like an offer that is supposed to invite you, but as something that's actually harmful to you. And in this condition, I would say, like an unpresentation approach, an unpresentational approach, is probably the best you can do, right? Because the modes of representation that we have at our disposal are harmful. So the reaction could be, and I think in this group at least, the curatorial arrangement provides that. In this condition, we can try to scramble the codes without recontracting them into a finished image that can then satisfy our desire for like a full narrative and something that we can see that is like us, and so forth. Okay, so now we have seen a situation of representational justice and a situation of like unpresentation in a way. But the question, of course, is okay. Now we have like a nice little group at like some like corner of like Arsenale exhibition. Does it do anything? Here I want to like, how much time do I have? Oh, I'm good. Okay, easy. Are you still here? You all listening? Are you completely confused? Who's completely confused? That's not enough to repeat anything. Okay. Okay, so you remember society is being more and more commodified. One of the symptoms of this commodification is what I call representational justice. Representational justice doesn't actually benefit the people being represented necessarily. One way of dealing with it, which I try to outline to you in this little group at the Arsenale exhibit, is to unpresent and to scramble the codes and to display the scrambledness of these codes. And I think that is an apt way of doing it in a way under the condition of epistemic violence, of the impossibility to represent at all. So you can at least display this impossibility. Okay. Now another question is does it do anything? What's the point here? So one question that you might have had is, okay, let's assume this transsexual contract thing exists, right? Let's assume there was a social agreement somehow that being trans is not the thing that you should do, which of course also has been commodified, and now you can be trans and speak at a stage about trans theory to audiences at Venice Biennial and be paid for it and be invited, and they have your flight paid and all of these things. So the commodification machine works. But underneath that, I would still think we can see very clearly that the transsexual contract is in place. You can see that, for example, if you look at the various attempts to rewrite it. For example, with the new self-determination law in Germany, the recent new trans legislations in Spain, the millions of laws in the United States, et cetera, et cetera. But my question is, why are trans people, why are queer people a problem to begin with? Why have there ever been a problem? And my suggestion is, it's because of the baby. So let's go a step back. Yes, exactly. Let's move a step back and think okay, so we live in nation states, and nation states usually, nationalisms usually understand themselves as reproductive communities. And reproductive communities want to reproduce their culture and their people and their money, of course. All right? So one important asset that a national economy has are babies. Why do we need babies? We need babies in order to produce a huge workforce that's going to be unemployed so that we decrease the price of labor. We need babies so we can capture the parents and make them comply. Because as soon as you have a baby, you also have responsibility, you need to make money, you need to file all the things, you have to be, a functioning member of society. You can't live the crazy artsy life anymore. You can't, go out and drink all day and, work all night. The baby is asking for care in the morning and all of this crap. Okay, so the baby has at least two very important functions. The one is submit the parents. The other one is keep the price of labor low. Okay, so we want babies. But how do we get people to make babies? People don't necessarily want to, have babies. So we need to tell them that their task and the biggest promise in their life really is the baby. So we need an ideology of the baby, which is why it's in caps lock here, okay? So I'm not talking about actual children. I'm talking about the baby as an ideological formation, okay? So don't get at me and say, you're just a child-hating lesbian. I might be that, but it doesn't play any role here, okay? This is about an ideological formation. Okay, so the ideological formation of the baby submits and exploits and oppresses people, and trans people and queer people stand in the way of the baby. Why is that? Because trans people and queer people oftentimes don't make babies. They don't have to. If you take enough hormones, you become infertile. Of course, you can still have babies, you can adopt, people want babies. I'm not saying if you're trans or like you're queer, you can't have a baby, but it's not, it's not this like, you and me love forever the baby submission to like the baby economy pipeline that you have in like heterosexual cisgender ideology, all right? So you can see that structurally speaking, trans people and queer people stand in the way of the baby, and the baby is the veneer of the nation state to submit the parents and to keep the economy up. All right, so that's my suggestion is that like that is one important reason, like an important like political, ideological reason why queer and trans people were a problem and in a way are still a problem. And you can see this in the way in which like pro-trans and pro-queer discourses are being led, right? Because like it's always about the baby. We need to protect the children, the trans children, the queer children. Think about the children. They can't do it. Like these like little children that like transition at like 5 years or like, that like are very innocent, play a huge role in pro-trans and pro-queer discourse. So this is the kind of politics that basically tries to appease the heterosexual, cisgender, patriarchal logic of the baby. And of course, because epistemic violence, we can't do any different. This is the path that we have to take. All right. I think it's very interesting to see, and I'll be done in 5 minutes, to see how, regarding the baby, for example, in the Arsenale exhibit, representational justice strikes again. So here we have the wonderful piece by Frida Toranzo, Jäger, Rage is a Machine in Times of Senselessness. And Frida Toranzo Jäger has a long history of doing wonderful lesbian-themed art. Here's a detail of that. So like, this is really like, I mean, there's many things happening here, but one thing that's happening here is a celebration of lesbian sexuality. No babies. Sexuality without babies. Okay, and it's interesting that it's curated in a way that it's that is juxtaposed with Bordaros de Isla Negra's 1972 untitled work that, other than this, like, let's get out of like reproduction and the traditional distinction of labor thing, returns in a way to the traditional division of labor, where here you can see the guys doing the field work, and I don't have a pointer, but on the upper left, you can see the girl, like carrying the harvest home. And these are two, in a way, these are two pieces that are face to face, right? They exist across from each other. On the one hand, the celebration of lesbian sexuality, no babies, no gender division of labor. On the other hand, division of labor, gender division of labor. So in a way, regarding the actual proposals for actual social change, representational justice strikes again. What can be done? This is not working anymore. Help. Okay. What can we do? My suggestion is, and I've articulated this in various of my works. My suggestion is that, of course, if the problem is the commodification of society, if the problem is the commodification of justice, if the problem is the commodification of democracy, then we need to decommodify. If the problem is capitalism, we need to fight capitalism and unlearn capitalism. How do we fight capitalism? My suggestion is we do it through hospitality. Why hospitality? Well, because in hospitality, we have a practice that deals with ownership, but it doesn't deal with ownership through private property. So if I invite you over to my place to eat cake, and I put the cake on the table, You don't have to ask me for every single piece of cake. But the cake is ours. Just please have some cake. If I think my favorite example of a hospitable encounter is a hot sexual encounter, a flirt, because here, in a way, you're not only the guest at my place or at my body, but I'm also a guest in your place or your space or your mind and your body. All right? So I would think like in certain interesting sexual encounters, we are guests at and in each other's bodies. So here you have like an anti-hierarchical, hospitable encounter, which is still, doesn't mean that my body isn't my body. I have ownership over my body. But it means that I'm not owning my body in an exclusionary way. And I would think like practices of hospitality work in this exact same way. So like hospitality teaches us in a way to have things and to manage things, but not in this like exclusionary, commodifying way. And usually people have a lot of fun with this. People like being invited, people like flirting. Of course, you know, like there are bad flirts, there's bad invitations. You don't want to go to your grandmother because she always wants to like feed you as much cake as she can because it's good for her mental being or something like that. But you know, aspirationally, there's a good way of like doing the hospitality thing. I have to finish, right? Yes, I'm going to show you just like one more picture, because. As the cherry on top. So this is a piece that I saw in Berlin this year. This is Fadi Al-Jabour's Pre-Construction from 2025, and this is a sculptural environment in which a conference on trans, inter, and non-binary rights was conducted. I have an image here on what this looked like. So here you have a structure that doesn't take place in an art context. So it's not like, you know, I put a thing in a white cube, but this is a sculptural structure that intervenes into direct queer and trans politics, where like the political process is made more inviting by a change of the spatial constellation. So here you can see two people having a conversation in a way that like is in a way also de-traumatizing. So I'm not sure if you've ever been at queer and trans events, but my impression is if you put a lot of traumatized people together, they probably re-traumatize each other. So like this, I can hear you laughing. You know what I'm talking about. All right. So, you know, I think there is a task for artists and for curators to work actively with political contexts and political groups, not to bring the political groups necessarily into the art context, but to find artistic ways of like reshuffling what politics looks like in itself, and to help us and to help political interventions to decommodify their practice and strive for a better kind of justice. Thank you for your attention.
Well, thank you, Lucy, for your thoughts and challenges. I'd like to invite now Diane Andich and Agli from the Istanbul Trans Pride Exhibition Collective, a group of activists, artists, and scholars dedicated to trans rights and preserving the memory of Turkey's trans movements. And just to tell you, Burak is going to join us just for the Q&A, so please, Diane and Agli.
Hello, everyone. Before I start, I would like to thank Sofia for invitation to the Venice Biennale, Ilaria for keeping up the email traffic during the process, and the organizers of this year's Biennale. We were very excited to receive such an invitation at a time when we were not feeling well, especially after the forced closure of the exhibition, about which Asya will talk about in a moment.
Önce o bana saldırdı. Sonra ben de karşılık verdim. Tutuklanmaktan korkmadım.
My name is Jian. I am a graduate student in the sociology department at Boğaziçi University. I'm a researcher and I'm also interested in documentary filming. Today, Asya and I will talk about the idea of organizing the exhibition on the history of the trans movement in Turkey, the process of collecting materials, the setting up, and the forced closure process. Before that, it would be useful to take a look at Turkey's recent past in order to make more understandable what we are about to tell. The current backlash against the LGBTI+ community in Turkey is rooted in a long-established history of otherization and violent marginalization against minorities in the Republic. The foundations of the Turkish Republic were built on massacre of nearly 1.5 million Armenians in 1915. The Armenian genocide is still not recognized by the Turkish state. The source of the wealth of the bourgeoisie in Turkey is property of non-Muslims confiscated through methods such as genocide and population exchange. The Turkish state has often practiced extreme violence against opponents and at the same time constantly refused to evolve its own violence. Since the foundation of the republic, the state has attempted to expel or eliminate some minorities while assimilating others, such as Kurds. Turkey's war policies against Kurds, especially since the 90s, have played an important role in threatened other social groups as well. The 90s is a period when the public visibility of the LGBTI+ movement increased and the first non-governmental organizations focusing on the problems of LGBTI+ persons were established. In the same years, the process of gentrification of Ülker Street in Istanbul, where many trans people used to live, and which is of great importance for them, began. This process was also carried out with the aim of removing trans people from Beyoğlu, a central district in Istanbul, which is the center of nightlife and trans visibility. In 2003, the first Pride March in Turkey was held in Taksim Square. Trans people who were excluded and not represented in the LGBTI+ movement chose the path of self-organization in the early 2000s. During this period, important publications, which are also included in the exhibition, were published and trans self-organizations were founded. 7 years later, the first Trans Pride March was organized. In 2015, hopes for change arose after the HDP, People's Democratic Party, which has pursued a pro-Kurdish and intersectional policy, weakened the ruling party by overcoming the 10% election threshold. In response, the state escalates armed clashes in Kurdistan and provides space for the armed activities of ISIS militants in Turkey. The Istanbul Pride March was first banned in 2015 because it supposedly would disturb people's sensitivities due to the month of Ramadan and has subsequently been blocked on grounds of citizen safety and public order. In 2021, protests were organized against the government-appointed rector at Boğaziçi University. In an exhibition held at the university during this period, there was a collage artwork featuring a Kaaba figure with LGBTI+ lesbian, trans, and asexual flags, and a Shahmeran, a mythological figure, which is half snake, half woman, and is found in Anatolian Mesopotamian. 4 people thought to be associated with the work were detained on the grounds of insulting religious values adopted by a section of the public. The process that started with the targeting of the artwork in the exhibition evolved into a hate campaign in which LGBTI pluses were targeted and LGBTI plus associations were called for closure. The interior minister at the time said 4 LGBT perverts were detained, and Erdogan said about the protest, LGBT, there is no such thing. This country is national, spiritual, and marches towards the future with these values. Civil societies, organizations were also targeted in the same period. The law on prevention of financing the proliferation of weapon of mass destruction passed in 2021 allows for the restriction of legitimate activities by civil societies, organizations, and their arbitrary closure with the aim to suppress social opposition. As the protest against the rector continued with the widespread participation of other university students, discussion on Turkey's withdrawal from the Istanbul Convention came to the agenda. The convention obliged state parties to implement its provisions without discrimination on any grounds, including sexual orientation. Turkey withdrew from the Istanbul Convention in 2021 on the grounds that it would legitimize homosexuality and destroy the sacred institution of the family. LGBTI plus people were criminalized and the rainbow flag became a criminal element. In 2021, 2023, 2022, the 173 people who tried to gather for the Istanbul LGBTI plus Pride March were detained collectively. Many events organized by LGBTI pluses, such as breakfasts, picnics, teas, movies, demonstrations, and press statements, were banned. During 2023 presidential election, the ruling bloc based its election campaign on LGBTI plus hatred. LGBTI pluses were portrayed as deviant and a threat to the family. Erdogan, who won the election, targeted LGBTI pluses in victory speech, saying that the opposition was LGBTI pluses and that LGBTI pluses could not infiltrate the People's Alliance. Interior Ministry Soylu also characterized the election as an election won by those who said no to LGBT. Similar to the exclusion methods of heterosexism against the LGBTI plus community, the official ideology also attempts to suppress and eliminate identities that are not Turkish and Muslim Sunni through methods such as denial, assimilation, and neglect. Demands for the democratic resolution of the Kurdish issue and the LGBTI plus struggle for rights are considered as problem created and incited by external forces. The issue are externalized and the demands for rights are ignored. Today, not only the debate on Kurds, but also on LGBTI pluses is being discussed within framework of secularization. The ruling party and its allies, judiciary members, states institutions, and pro-government media position Kurds as a threat against the nation, while LGBTI plus individuals are portrayed as a threat to the family. Before coming to the power, the president visited Where I Safe LGBTI plus space, saying, I ask for your vote, for your heart, your support, and emphasize the need to legally safeguard the rights and freedoms of homosexuals, stating, we find the treatment they sometimes receive on certain television screens inhumane. Erdogan also declared in a television program in 2002 that the rights of homosexuals should be legally guaranteed. Today, however, after the 2013 Gezi Park uprising, the government has changed its strategy and it's trying to criminalize and dehumanize social movements actors and to legitimize state violence against them. As an example of these, on June 30, 2024, the Istanbul government issued a ban against this year's march, declaring LGBTI+ people illegal. The discriminatory discourses produced by the government in Turkey cause LGBTI+ persons to be subjected to discrimination in state mechanism and legal terms. In legal terms, the big family gathering, first organized in 2022 in Saraçhane, Istanbul, with the claim that LGBTI+ target the family, and other gatherings organized in different cities of the country afterwards can be considered in this context. At this point, I think that the exhibition Döndün Bak has an important role. Turn and See Back is also emphasized that the LGBTI+ movement can find solidarity with other social movements struggling against oppression and persecution. It also shows that the movement has a history of at least 40 years, in contrast to anti-gender movements that portray LGBTI+ people as a community with no history, or as a result of the manipulating to external forces. We also wanted to show in the exhibition that transgender people are resisting subject, not subject who are violent or who occupy a fixed victimized position as they are often represented in traditional media. In doing so, we tried not to fall into the victim-hero dichotomy often used in historiography. The newspaper articles we used in the exhibition mostly generated hate speech and were written in a discriminatory language. Although the focus of the newspaper clippings in the exhibition is on hate and discrimination, I think we also found traces of the history of the trans movement and resistance in Turkey. Now, I will show the video we shot for the promotion of the exhibition, which we shared by blurring the location of the venue because we published it on the dates when the exhibition was not yet closed. And I will leave the floor to Asya.
Hello. Thank you, Jian. I'm Asya Leman. I'm a visual artist and a film editor and also an activist. and one of the co-curators of the Turn and See Back exhibition. Turn and See Back, Revisiting Trans Revolutions in Turkey, is an archival exhibition that took place in Istanbul between 26th of June and 11th of July this year, even though you saw that there was like, it's gonna open until 27th of July, but it didn't happen like that. I'll begin my presentation by touching on the matter of remembrance. Remembrance is the sum of all internal past experiences, and while remembering, we are actually writing a story. This is true whether we are remembering personal or social experiences, because when we remember within a plot. In our personal stories, both others and their stories exist. Hotbox, while defining remembrance, says that personal memory and collective memory are intertwined. Therefore, memories are collective narratives that are constantly retold. The thing that enables us to answer questions like who am I and what happened is about rewriting that story each time. This shows us that narrative identity is not separate from collective memory or social memory. Therefore, we can say that remembering is rewriting a collective story by telling it to each other. Let's remember the Gezi resistance. Gezi was a social movement that lasted 16 days with very concrete demands, bringing together different segments of society and groups, embracing different ideologies in a common imagination. Although the Gezi resistance ended with a tremendous police violence and many casualties after these 16 days, it is remembered with both celebration and commemoration. We don't talk about the success or failure of the resistance. The expectation that such a strong resistance will occur again one day is now there. This expectation is hope. In this sense, the greatest success of social resistance is producing hope. Similarly, when we look at the history of the trans movement, remembering the times from pride marches attended by only 20-25 people to times when hundreds of people marched and chanted slogans together with trans people corresponds to the cultural transmission of that hope. So how did we decide to create this exhibition? The political power in Turkey continued to narrow the spaces of LGBTI+ and women, not only through targeting, pressure, and violent practices, as Jian mentioned, but also through restriction and bans from different fronts. For example, we have an event called Queer Olympics that has been organized for the 8th time this year, a 3-day event where queers participate together in sports activities like football, volleyball, athletics, or online gaming, which added this year, discussing fair competition in sports, and it taking place every summer in Istanbul. Again, in a similar activism talk like this, a friend responded to the question, like, how did you decide to organize Queer Olympics? They answered, we need to run long distances and have quick reflexes to escape from the police. First, we started running to escape from the police. Now we run at Queer Olympics. This is, of course, dark humor. In 2019, on the second day of Queer Olympics events, it was dispersed and banned with water cannon vehicles on the grounds of protecting public order, preventing crime, protecting public health, and public morality. Since that year, the organization that organizes this event has been continuing its activities without making public announcements. The Queer Film Fest, which has been organized in Ankara since 2011 by Pink Life Association, a trans self-organization, aiming to draw attention to discrimination and violence against LGBTI+ individuals, while creating opportunities to discuss queer theory and art in in Turkey was banned by the governmentship in 2017 for the purpose of protecting public order, public health, and public morality, and the rights and freedom of others. Where was I? Others. Immediately after the governorship announced that any LGBTI+ related events in Ankara were banned indefinitely, from the date it was banned until 2024, QueerFest continued to hold its events in Istanbul and different cities of Turkey as a traveling festival. This year, the festival, which moved its events back to Ankara with the theme Homecoming, was banned again by the governorship. However, the event took place in different venues without making a public announcement, but sending private messages to all guests. While we continued our struggle to exist as LGBTI+ and women subjects in the face of all these bans and obstacles, we also tried to transform public spaces into areas of resistance. The meaning of organizing and creating space began to change as well. In narrowing spaces, we tried to find cracks to seep through. We said, if we can't chant slogans saying we existed, we exist, we will exist, we will shout this through archives and art. The Turn and See Back archive exhibition came to life as a form of activism within the Trans Pride Week, which was organized for the 10th time this year, both to celebrate this and to remember the history of trans struggle within the LGBTI+ movement. Trans Pride Week, which continued to resist after being banned in 2015 until 2017, then took a break until 2022, was organized in its 10th year with the theme, "The State is the Perpetrator." The theme, "The State is the Perpetrator," was the theme of last Trans Pride Week we marched without banned in 2014. After all these years, the state continues to kill, massacre, and violate our rights. This theme was chosen to hold the state accountable and remind it of the crimes it's committed. Along with this, Istanbul Pride Week also adopted the theme, "I Remember, Do You Remember?" The theme, "I Remember, Do You Remember?", chosen by Istanbul Pride Week with the intention of remembering and reminding the history of LGBTI+ movement in Turkey, is almost in a dialogue with the State is the Perpetrator theme repeated by Trans Pride Week in this respect. After deciding to create this archive exhibition, we discussed where we could realize it. Depot, being the most political, culture, art, and discussion space in Istanbul, was the first place that came into our minds. I want to open the parenthesis here to explain what kind of place Depot is and briefly mention Osman Kavala, who was instrumental in opening this space. Depot aims to be a center where political and social projects are realized and provides a platform for people active in culture, art field, academics, researchers, and a wide audience to exchange ideas and experiences and collaborate through its events. Its founder, Osman Kavala, is an important figure who pioneered the development of civil society in Turkey. Taking culture, artwork as its focus, he established Anadolu Kültür, a non-profit institution, in 2002. Depot is a part of this institution that aims to establish a culture of social peace through its projects. Osman Kavala, who became a target of the government after Gezi resistance, has been imprisoned since 2017. A small anecdote. We had a meeting with Depot to discuss our intention to create an archive exhibition researching the history of trans movement in Turkey. Depot's project coordinator, Asena Günal, was very receptive to this idea and said she would support us in everything we needed. As a marked movement in Turkey, and because Depot is in similar vulnerability due to its political stance, We felt the need to confirm by asking, like, are you sure the police might raid here? Are you taking this risk? And Asena responded by saying, friends, are you sure? The state is already monitoring this place. Are you taking this risk? And we ended our meeting with bitter laughter. Indeed, we opened the exhibition on June 26th without an open announcement and kept the exhibition venue secret, knowing that the Ministry of Internal Affairs was an alert during June, which is a Pride month. We decided to announce the exhibition as if it were an ordinary exhibition at Depot starting from the first week of July. 4 days after, the exhibition was promoted on Depot's social media accounts and website. The Beyoğlu District governorship, backed by the police, served a ban order, confiscated the exhibition, and shut it down. They not only ensured the deletion of all information about the exhibition from Depot's social media accounts and website, but also ruled that no press statements should be made regarding the ban and closure. This is the state's explicit performance of erasing this memory. About the exhibition, where we covered the period extending over 40 years from the 1980 coup to the present, we can categorize the materials we used as newspaper and magazine clippings, photographs, printed publications produced by the community, videos and TV programs, oral history, event posters, and protest banners. During our research for the exhibition, we transformed one of the most inspiring video news reports into a kind of video art piece. And you watched it at the beginning of the presentation of Jia. In this video, we see a trans woman reacting to an undercover police officer attacking the crowd during a protest by using her high-heeled shoe that she took off her foot. We describe this footage as seen capturing the essence of the trans movement. A high-heeled shoe against the law enforcement representing the state, fearlessly confronting the violence imposed on the trans body and existence. A high-heeled shoe that repeatedly comes down on the police. A high-heeled shoe resisting against the state. Opposite this video installation is a room we called room, sigh room, where we commemorate our losses. While creating the exhibition, our plan was to create a room where we could mourn all our trans friends who were murdered and driven to suicide since the 80s that we could reach by writing their names on the wall. However, we could only commemorate 70 people with their chosen names. These murders, suicide, were generally not covered in mainstream media, and if they were covered, either their dead names or just the initials of their names were used. There were so many unmourned losses, just like the unmourned deaths of people killed, massacred in Palestine genocide in Lebanon. We must not forget that this lack of collective mourning leads to the normalization of deaths and the normalization of continuing violence. We are obliged to resist, to remember hope again, turn and see back.
Bugün 30 Haziran 2024. Bugünle yürüyoruz aşkım. 22. yılımız kutlu olsun. Bugün tüm İstanbul'u ablukaya aldınız. Tüm yolları, meydanları kapattınız. Koca bir şehirde hayatı durdurdunuz. Ama şunu unuttunuz. Biz gerekirse taşı deler, zamanı büker, yine birbirimizin gülüşlerimizde buluruz. Hatırlıyor musun temasıyla 32. onur haftasını bugün yürüyüşümüzle sonlandırıyoruz. Birlikte binlerce olduğumuz, kaybettiğimiz Lübnya yol arkadaşlarımızı, Gezi direnişinde kaybettiğimiz yoldaşlarımızı, Roboski'yi, Filistinlere Ucuma'daki savaş suçlarını, kayyum ile gasp edilen belediyelerimizi, tutsak edilen vekillerimizi, Berkin Elvan'ı, Ceylan Özgol'u, deprem bölgelerinde ihmal nedeniyle hayatını kaybeden binlerce insanı KYK ile işinden ederek açlığa sürüklediğiniz milyonları, başıboş diye yaptaladığınız sokak köpeklerini unutmadık. Küründen yasak tebligatlarınızı tanımadık. Bir gün bir kıta değiştirdik. Sabahları hep partiledik, sokaklarda örgütlendik. Alışın buradayız.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Jean and Aja, for informing us about your exhibition and the context from which it emerges. Now I'd like to welcome Vabene Alikemfiachi, who's a Ghanaian multidisciplinary artivist, curator, philanthropist, and mentor. So please, Vabene.
Thank you for inviting me here. I'm really excited to be speaking at the Venice Biennale, which is one of the biggest platforms that has become a place to validate what we have already been doing. And so, coming from the Global South, coming from Ghana, and to be speaking to audience here, it's not just an honor, but I would also say it's a privilege for a trans person like me to be here. Performance as an act of radical resistance, for me, is the way of walking out of the canvas to confront our death in public spaces. As I stand here, I am speaking as evangelist, which is artist, activist, and evangelist. I am the founder and the artistic director of Purple Craze International Artist Residency, which I'll be giving a short details on, and also the Craziness Artist Studio. Recently, I have launched another gallery space, which is called our Railway Cinema Gallery, all in Ghana. They all aim at bridging the gap between the art and the people, and at the same time promoting a kind of exchange program between local and international artists. Here is the space that I'll be talking about later, which is a rented space that I host the residency, and the same space that I host mentees, and it's also a refuge for queer young Ghanaians who need shelter and also who need a space to live to continue their education. So as a trans woman, you know, sometimes, many years ago, I wouldn't define myself as a trans person. But when I decided to start calling myself as a trans person, is to reclaim the language in a way that it become a resistance, that you acknowledge who is speaking, you acknowledge who you are looking at. Otherwise, we have just been humans as any other person in Ghana until the rise of evangelical, conservative, pro-life invasion of Africa and Ghana for that matter. As many of you might already know, I work largely across Europe, America, but I live in Ghana, and it's a resistance for me to remain in Ghana. I think my soul, my spirit will be at rest if I die in Ghana. Despite the threat, the violence, and the risk. Because I believe that artists are the spiritual backbones of their societies. So why should I run away? In African traditions and many indigenous traditions, the people who hold the soul of the society are the artists. Our arts were not exhibited in museums. They were meant to be part of the life of the people, to be part of their spiritual life, economic life, social life, agricultural life. And that is the kind of artist I seek to be and to challenge the society. So since 2013, I have been working largely in public spaces.
Yebetimi tolerate mu se mo be di o man ni sika. Yebetimi tolerate mu Some of all forms of corruption now. Now so yantimi tolerate some de amrabi beba any nyankopo mrano ebe bobra. Some de no ba ya catch them say we will disobey you. We will disregard your orders and we will make sure say we lynch them. We will follow them in every corner and we will make sure that we kill them. You are going to make this country ungovernable and we are not going to tolerate that. And so we are sounding this caution to all of you. You should make sure that this bill gets passed. Because Ghanaians, we are not prepared to accept any gayism in this country. And if you don't do that, and you do politics with it, make sure you are waiting for us. Because you are making this country ungovernable. We will make sure that we destabilize this country if you don't follow what we want.
And these are the realities that we are confronting and facing in Ghana. That someone can be in a public television, national television, and preaching such a hateful word that if the current bill in Ghana is not signed by the president, they will make sure that they follow us into every home and make sure that they lynch us, make sure they kill us. This is Ghana today. And that is the situation as it stands. Just as I was preparing for this presentation, there was a huge protest last week, I think 9th of October, allowing the churches, politicians, to parade the streets, screaming no to homosexuals, no to LGBTQ, no to trans people. The bill I'm talking about here is not the kind of bill that you might have heard of in Poland or even the USA. The anti-LGBTQ bill in Ghana, which is also named Family Value Bill, seeks to jail even parents who have queer children and will not bring their children to the police or report them. Landlords who will host or accommodate queer persons, whether trans, gay, lesbian, bisexual, the landlord will be jailed. Doctors, schools, any institution that would render any service to queer persons are criminalized. Journalists are criminalized to ever speak on any queer identity. So, in summary, solidarity, empathy is a crime in Ghana if the bill is signed. And that is the kind of fight and battle we find ourselves in right now. This is the MP, Member of Parliament, who is the proponent of the anti-LGBTQ bill,
all of them with
leading this
Ghana flags
protest just last week.
In their hands, and some also in their headgears. They are unanimous in their decision. They do not support LGBTQ activities in Ghana, and they want expedited hearing by the Supreme Court. So that's them outside there, ready to receive the signal to start marching. You can also see a heavy security presence. Here to my left, there are a lot of policemen and women who are also ready to offer protection to the protesters who are yet to begin their march. We're told that a lot of
as you witness all this, bear in mind that we cannot even hold a protest as queer people in Ghana.
They are also
that we would even be granted the police protection.
They want expedited hearing
to go
by
on
the
any
Supreme
protest.
Court, and of course
would be a kind of walking into the lion den.
Darkness that have conspired in the corridors of power, be they in the executive or the judiciary, to stand against the will of the people of Ghana. That was expressly stated on the 28th of February 2024, when Parliament unanimously did the third family values bill.
So it is very important to understand that the situation in Ghana and many West African countries is beyond the chapters of the Bible. So to even be here today and summarize this in 25 minutes, it's just like, I wouldn't even call it a trailer, but it's just like giving you the title of what is going on and to draw your curiosities to look into the other world,
For her to continue
to see what is happening.
in the will of the delivery of justice. Because justice delayed is justice denied.
Because it's beyond the realities.
And we will get justice today. Thank you very much for coming.
It's beyond the realities of many people who live in Euro-America. This is something so similar to the witch trial of Salem, Massachusetts. If you dream, if you scream, if you have a fever, and you are alleged a witch, you are just a witch and you'll be murdered. If your parents will hide you, they will be murdered. So if you know about the Salem witch trial, then you can see that relationship. All this anti-LGBTQ propaganda in Ghana is so new to Ghanaians. And to me, I'm 43 years old. And I never grew up in any other country apart from Ghana. My first ever fit into Europe was 2016. I was already 35 years old. So homophobia, as they allege, is imported from the West. Is rather, as they allege that homosexuality is imported from the West, it's rather unfortunate that homophobia is what is from the West. The hate for queer people is promoted by the far-right evangelical organizations such as the World Congress of Families. And these are not secret things now to even think that, oh, you are revealing a secret. No. Just Google Ghana and add the World Congress of Family to it. Just Google that. And you will see their first conference in Ghana, 2019. Soon after that conference, this bill came into Parliament, and we are battling it until now.
Kill him. Kill him.
So for me, since we cannot rally the streets of Ghana as queer people, like a pride march, or even for protest, it became very important for me to start putting my body in public space. Because it's one thing to be in the canvas as a naked person, and as a trans person, as a queer person, it's another thing to be in public space, to experience and to face it, and for the people to be confronted with that reality. So this is called Holier Than Thou, which I performed 2001, soon after they sent the bill to the Parliament.
And kill him, and kill him. Remember, if Christ should come again as a black trans woman, or remember, if Christ should come back again as a black woman, who will kill him?
Yes, so that's the question I was asking. As Ghana has positioned itself as one of the most righteous countries in the West Africa, who would kill Christ if Christ returned today as a black woman, even as a black man, and to even think about a black trans woman? Who would kill Christ? Of course, my works are influenced by my past lives. I was an evangelist. I was a preacher. And I renounced the church and Christianity at the age of 33. I didn't plan it. But symbolically, that's the age of Christ dying. Because for me, it became important for me to leave the church when I realized that the more I get to know about a church, the more I realize that Christianity has nothing to do with Christ's character. if we want to talk about the Crusaders, that's not Christ-like. And so that became very important for me exiting the church. And I would say it became the kind of art evangelism that I've been doing ever since. Doing performances like this where I put myself on fire in public spaces, try to allow the audience to witness the lynching, attack that queer, alleged witches, alleged criminals face in public spaces, and everybody just stand by and watch you burn to death. So this is on my YouTube. You can watch the video. And necklacing is a very colonial punishment where black people would be burnt in public or hanged in public or lynched to put fear in the other people not to rebel. That tool remains with us, internalized oppression. And so in some of my performances, I try to use those elements in a way that the people can face those realities where they are not participating in the violence, but become witnesses to the violence. This also I performed in Chalewate Arts Festival as an intervention, put myself in spikes, rusted, sharpened spikes, as a cross, trying to survive, trying to resurrect. And surprisingly, that's the president of Ghana on the screen in the purple top. Coming to this performance, or this exhibition, he wasn't coming to my performance, he was coming to the festival. And they sent the police, the militaries to the festival ahead of him to pull down every naked photograph and every nude painting. Little did he know that he was going to actually face a nude, naked body lying before him. Conversations after this performance revealed that the president himself was not only in shock, but became very vulnerable, experiencing that death that he was facing. It is my hope and my dream that such kind of interventions and encounter can make people rethink and experience what they wouldn't experience in their rooms or in their homes. And so he being the current president to sign this bill, I am wondering if some of these things that he has already encountered and experienced are influencing the way he thinks about human rights. I personally wrote a letter to him and waiting for him to invite me for a talk, which never happened. On my third visit following up, I was attacked by the militaries in the presidential palace. So when I perform and I work in Europe, I'm so much aware of the different layers. I'm aware of the kind of security and safety that are provided, like this performance in Switzerland. It's nothing compared to if I would perform in a public space in Ghana, because one, it is in the context of art, and that becomes a kind of safe space. And two, you have curators and you have directors, you have producers who are all on standby. If anything even goes wrong, I'm sure people will intervene. But in the Ghanaian public space, none of that can be assured. But of course, I have to do this in Europe to be able to get the money to take care of the projects that I run back in Ghana. So when I was thinking about this project called The Dust in My Bed, it was one of the ways I started thinking about the queer healing. Thinking about healing in itself as an alternative wound that we have to survive to be whole. I am not sure it's any pleasure for any of us as trans people to walk into surgical ward and to be disserted. And that is the way I think about healing as a ritual. And to present a black body in European space being aware of white audience is another layer of looking back into our own sense of becoming and how we reclaim space, how we take those spaces. So in Switzerland, 2022, because I wasn't in Ghana on these days to protest and perform in a public space, I decided to mount Kill the Bill protest in front of the Ghana embassy without permission. Because of course I understand in Europe, if you want to protest against the police, you can go to the police and ask permission. That police, we are coming to protest on the 9th of October, but we need permission to come and protest against you, the police. And you'll be granted the permission to go, and I've seen it in Berlin. The police can grant you the permission to come and protest against the police, and you have police escorts sometimes in some of those places. But we don't have those kind of privileges and opportunities to even call for protest that you go to the police. And so I decided to test that ground, protesting in front of the Ghana embassy without any permission. At least the performance ended before the police arrived. Back in Ghana, I walked into the parade where the president was going to give a speech on Independence Day. And I call it, Oga Landlord, permit me to march for my people. Because of the exclusion of queer people in many other activities, even education, our independence in Ghana is so meaningless to some of us, or to most of us. So on that celebration, I decided again to invade the parade and send a letter to the president. And in the letter, it was just written, we are also Ghanaians. Permit me to march for my people. At the entrance, as you see, they have to lock the gates when I arrived and started calling for securities. I remember telling my colleagues and my team that be a photographer, don't be a team member. Should I be attacked by the police or the militaries? Deny me, you don't know me, because your survival is more important to me. If you are associated with me, both of us might be harmed or murdered. Nobody tells the story afterwards. Your camera is gone, everything is gone. And so most of the times, they have to also play that role by just being audience in public space and denying me when they are attacked. 2017, I decided to launch a residency called Perforcrace International Artist Residency. And this is the home I call a home of resistance. So the residency is hosting over 13 people recently, every month, from all over the world, not only Ghana, Switzerland, Brazil, Germany, Italy, all over the world. And for me, it's an important home to create where exchange becomes possible, where people can discuss the most difficult things that wouldn't be discussed in other spaces. That residency only became very possible because of my first trip to Switzerland, which was 2016, where I performed Regenerate. The salary I was paid in this was what I used to begin the space. As I speak right now, the space is at risk because when the bill is signed, we would have to be evacuated or evicted. Otherwise, our landlord would go to jail for giving us a space. And this is the space I've been developing since 2017 to date with my salaries. It has no funding, no public funding. So when I took the space, it's almost like a dead home, and I have to literally renovate And so those of you who know me as a nomad, I am a nomad because I need to make the money to continue to sustain the space. I'm traveling in a year. I'm traveling up between 10 to 16 different countries just for work. I have never even traveled for vacation yet. Because many of the public fundings from Europe or Euro-America do not understand the possibility of sustaining a space like this. And so they are not willing to invest their money into such a space. I have applied for several grants for this space. Sometimes they go through to the last stage and they say, Vabene, we are very sorry that our funders say they are unable to support such a project.
Not be friends anymore. Oh. I will talk again.
And so every year, I try to create new interventions. So this was the Radicalizing the Art project in the space that I bring a lot of queer young activists or artists and host them for 1 month, taking them through the process of transforming their practice into a kind of advocacy or resistance. And that's aside the main residency that is being run. So that's the space you are seeing as at 2023. That's how the space has transformed. And if you come to the space today, the 18th of October, 2024, you are not going to see the space the same way. So each time the space is transforming, these are arrival of artists to the residency and the way they interact with the locals. And also the mentorship program that I run is to offer the young people who need to go to school. Currently, we have 3 recent awardees who are in the university, and 2 of them also graduated just this year from the university. And of course, this depends on how much I make. So depending on my income, I can take the numbers that I can afford to take at a time. Just this morning, I was receiving a call from one trans woman who has been trying to move to my space. And I try always to explain to her that I need some people to graduate and to move out to be able to take new persons. But of course, they don't understand this reality for me also, because they see me moving around the world all the time, so they think that I have all the resources it takes to bring them as soon as they reach out to me. This is one of my new graduates from the university. And then 2020, after we were attacked or alleged to be recruiting people into homosexuality, I decided to create a new intervention. I wish there is a way truly we can recruit people into homosexuality. I would have recruited my president into homosexuality. So that was a very heavy blow when I started hosting residents and all that. They said, okay, now I'm just recruiting, I built a factory for homosexuality. Soon after that, I always try to return hate with love. It's a way I want to heal a society. So when that happened, I was really, really broken to see the future or to imagine the future of the space. And then I decided to launch a new event called the Love Feast, which is happening every January since 2020. And this brings to the space over 400 people every January to eat together, to dance together, And everything is free for everyone. No one pays for food, drink, entrance. All you need is to register. And none of my projects are underground. They are all public. So even if the president Googles, even if the MP Googles, anyone, even the police Googles, this feast is online. And it's a way of bringing both queer and non-queer people into the space to interact, to engage, to meet. Because the true Ghanaian family value is tolerance, hospitality, love, empathy, and living together. Ghana in itself is a colonial product. We came together because of war. Over 100 different tribes with different unique identities. So this is what I wanted the Love Feast to reveal. When we had the first edition, it was 150 people. And then COVID hit hard. And I was like, I'm not sure people will come again because of COVID. So 2021, I wasn't expecting even 2 people to enter. And then that became 280 plus. This year, we counted over 450 people coming together to this house and to eat. On these days, I give speech as well, and I ask people sometimes that if you come to my house to eat with us, and you go home as a straight person but become trans or queer, it means that all your life you have just been so gay but you never knew. So eating with us never makes you gay. And it is a way of handling and dealing and confronting the fear of straight people who don't know why they are afraid of queer people. Because in Ghana, if you ask anybody why do you hate gay people, the only thing they tell you is that the Bible says no to homosexuality. However, from my priesthood, if anyone knows the Bible here very well, you look for it in the book of Ezekiel. The Sodom they use to talk about homosexuality has nothing to do with homosexuality. It's a rape. And so, in Ezekiel, it was already explained and defined that your sister Sodom was destroyed because of wickedness, greed, taking advantage of poor and marginalized people. So sometimes I have to preach on this day. And so the Love Feast has become a space where people can live their true self and also be witnessed by others. And it's also a space that a lot of so-called straight hetero people have come to unlearn and relearn. So it becomes also one of the ways we have expanded our allyship in Ghana, or at least within the local community there. Many of the kids that come to Love Feast would grow up and will not be in denial that queer people existed in Ghana or in their society. So at the residency, this is how we eat together. All our meals are communal. Everything we do is communal. And these are some of the artists who have participated in the residency so far. We encourage people to use the public space and also to collaborate with locals. At the same time, we are very mindful of people's relationship, class, gender, and also race, how that influences the way people respond to them in the community. Because you can be misinformed and misled as a white trans person in Ghana to think that people are so much accommodating of trans people. They don't see your transness or your queerness. What they see is your whiteness. And that can actually be misinforming. So these are some of the conversations we have as a community to look at our positionalities, our own classes. Like me, if I walk in the street of Berlin, actually I am not terrified in the dark because I'm a trans person in Berlin. No. But honestly, I am so terrified because I'm black. What they see is not my transness. What they see is not my queerness. What they see is my blackness. And most of my violent or public abuses and sexual harassment were in Berlin. And that is the same way the dice turn when you are from Europe in this residency. You can be misinformed when you don't pay attention to your own positions, either by race or by class or whatsoever. Yeah, so this is also one of the reasons why we promote and try to encourage people to take public spaces and see the different experiences that they will have in public spaces as opposed to what they would have in the residency space, which is just a bubble. So the residency is actually open to writers, curators, performers, painters, poets, musicians. Yeah, so that I would say currently we launch a GoFundMe, which is still running, and is our hope that we'll be able to buy our own space so that if we have to leave this house one day or soon because we have election in December and all the presidential candidates are preaching homophobia because that is the way they want to use to win their seat. So no one is actually talking about, when I come into power, I will make sure there is a queer right. No. So if this happens, that means we will lose our home. And so we are seeking for support systems where we can actually have our own spaces. At least, even if I should go to jail, I don't expect that my children back home should lose a home and become homeless. I'll be super proud to achieve that dream, that they have a home no matter what happens to me in the next few weeks, whilst Ghana will determine the next person in power. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Maria, for your talk here and for presenting us the situation. I'd like to invite everyone who was in the panel to come here and continue the discussion. I have a few questions, and then I open for the public. I hope you have shared and elaborated some things. So please, Luz, Jean, Buraki, Aja, Vabene, and Maria will continue with us here online. So everyone's here? Yes. Well, thank you all for your presentations. I think it was pretty exciting and pretty, how can I say, community creating to listen to all of our difference, but at the same time, like perceiving connections about different practices. And even though you have very different perspectives, one thing that really caught me is the idea of behavior. I mean, Lucy said that you have this idea of hospitality as a way of changing the way we do things. You guys presented a pamphlet, a manifestation picture in which they said, like, if you don't let us walk, then we will open our asses. And you are a performance artist. And Maria was also talking about this idea of hope as a way of really changing. So how do you think behavior can be a political instrument for political transformation in the case of queer people? And I think we could maybe follow the order of the presentation so we can have like a line of thoughts. So Lucy, could you start, please?
Can you repeat the term, the hate?
Behavior.
Behavior.
Yes, how behavior, like comportment, could be some tool for political transformation considering queer perspectives.
Yes, interesting question. let me say maybe like 2.5 things. The one is, I think individual behavior changes things for individual people, but doesn't change politics. I think one of the general philosophical questions that we need to answer, I'm a philosopher by training, is what ought to be done, what is to be done, and you can answer it in 2 different directions. What should I do, or what should we do? And if the question is what should we do, we're talking politics. And if the question is what should I do, we're talking morality. What should I do doesn't change politics, except if you're a political official, then it's a different game. But then you're acting on behalf of a community, right? Commodification tries to, capitalism tries to lure us into thinking that political decisions are consumer decisions, that which club you go to, which social media you consume, which products you buy are political decisions. I think this is wrong. I think the question is, how do we build other institutions? How do we gain political power? By political power, I don't mean our own clubs and like our own social media channels and like this crap. What I mean is parliamentary power. What I mean is government power. And my impression is most queer and trans people that I know are not thinking in that direction. And I think that is doing service to our enemy. If queerness becomes, or if transness becomes a choice of outfit and style and individual habits and like having good politics, or if it becomes clubbified, as I like to call it, or if it becomes a vehicle on any side to support a national project of like any, in any trajectory, like what we call homonationalism, then we are feeding the epistemic violence that is erasing us, that I try to talk about. Okay. So if the question is individual behavior, how does it change? How is it effective politically? I would say it isn't. If the question is towards collective behavior, I do think that we can think about and should think about, and I think it's a genuinely artistic task, to think about the collective practices, the collective institutions, and by social institutions, by collective institutions, I mean alternatives to romantic love, friendship, marriage, health insurances. These are all like social institutions. And the question for me is, and that's why I brought up hospitality, like if the paradigm of social relation wasn't private property and babies, but something else, like hospitality, what would these social institutions look like? What would mutuality look like? How would society be organized? What would be the important social relations? And I think this is an artistic task that can be performatively, theatrically, choreographically, sculpturally belabored. And I think as a philosopher, I would think this is where my job ends. As a philosopher, I would think I can formulate the question, and then I can try and like come up with artistic examples where I see this happening. And in the end, I try to like show one of them, right? Like where like an interior space, like this Fadi Al-Jabour's fur sculptures, facilitates an alternative way of political encountering, because you know that political relations are also architecturally, choreographically, theatrically embedded, right? Like we're sitting next to each other right now. This is a theater space. A parliament, like most parliamentary spaces, are built as theater spaces according to like a certain technological environment where you didn't have microphones, but you had to like scream at each other. Things like that, right? Like, so that's where I see the artistic task for the alternative capture or like staging of behavior, but it's not in like I change my own behavior. That I think is capitalistic ideology.
Great, thank you, Luz. I think we can go like in the order you presented. So you want to start with Burak? It's okay. So Burak, please, can you start?
Okay, hi. First of all, thanks for having me too, and I want to thank the organization. Well, what first came to my mind was behavior and queerness more as the way we form relationships with each other. I think that's what we also tried in the exhibition, to create a space to recreate actually a space which was taken from the authoritarian government, to create a space of, for example, hospitality, or how we create bonds and relationships in solidarity with each other. Maybe also as an aspect of healing as a community in Turkey, because we chose in the exhibition to focus on the resistance and to focus on the not being able to ban us or to ban queer and trans lives from the society or from Turkey in general, in specific. Yeah, that's what I was thinking of queerness as a form of relationships, of creating bonds and creating relationships that do not function in these binaries of a heterosexist or a heteronormative society.
Okay, thank you, Burak. Jim, please. No, okay, contemplated. Would you like to add something, Asian?
Yeah, thank you. First of all, I really admired your ideas because, yeah, that's true. Because always what we do is to resist against those oppressions, but it doesn't change anything at all. Other than that, we only lose the spaces and it gets more narrower and narrower. And so, and also it's like whenever we do, I don't know, some kind of gathering, let's say we make a movie, we create a play, we create a music, the only people who would listen or, you know, consume that kind of creations would be also us as well. But behaviorally, I think our, how to say, habit is just like, you know, saying no to what they ban, what they do to us, and just, you know, keep resisting and try to find the, you know, way to seep through the cracks. Yeah.
Thank you, Asia. Vabene, please.
Yeah, thank you. I think, first of all, I would say change is very relative. So if we want to talk about change in terms of our struggles, we have to also acknowledge the hierarchies in changes. And we have to acknowledge that as an individual, you can make a certain change, even if it's not a national change. There's a change happening. Why do I say that? If you already even witnessed the Love Feast program, which started with 150 people, now we are counting over 400 people. This program in itself is becoming, is reprogramming the minds of the people in my community in a way that the way some people respond to us 2 years ago is not the same way. You know, I was sharing my personal story just yesterday with some people that I came from a family, like I said, I was a priest, right? So you can imagine the home I came from. I came from a family that they are so Christian in a way that anything that is not seen as Christian is already the demon. You know, even African tradition is demonized by them. Okay, so when I came out as a trans and a queer person, I was already rejected by most of my families. And if I'm talking about family,
Ghanaian family, I'm honestly talking about something that is so distant from, let's say, the German family system. You know, family means a lot that people can hardly live without thinking about their families. So I was pushed away by all these families. The act of resistance and staying true to myself for 8 years has brought some of these people back to now talk to me. I had a call from my sister a day before yesterday and yesterday, and it's for the first time we are now talking. Like, this is my cousin sister, you know, and we are having a conversation where this person is telling me, you know, like, oh, you know, I truly miss you and I miss the person that you were before. And I was like, yes, I know you miss me, but I'm still here. You know, and then this conversation is changing this little one person, and that could change my nephews and niece who are the children of this person. And so that, yeah, so we can see change on different levels. Yes, and now, if we come back to change and hope, is that some of these activism or steps that some of us have taken is motivating and empowering our younger selves. And by so doing, before we think and before we realize, some of these people will be the people in power and in positions. And because they have already been radicalized and empowered, the way they would think when they get to those positions might be different from the people who are there right now. It does not mean we never have queer people in parliament or in politics. They are there. It's just that because we are under different privileges. I am a Ghanaian trans black person, but my transness and my privilege is far beyond some of the queer people in Ghana. I have a home, even though it's rented. It's gated. I can secure a safety for myself. But there are other trans queer people on the street who cannot, and they are much more vulnerable than myself. I have European visas, and I can fly in and out. Some of them, if this law becomes a law, they cannot escape. Now the question of hope and change is that if I remain silent, I will be safe in Ghana, because power is also privilege is also power, and money is also power. So once I can afford and care for myself in this little way, I am not faced by certain danger unless is politically ordered to come and arrest me. But for them, they are vulnerable, whether politically or socially. And so speaking out is giving some families the understanding of how to even be close to some of these queer children. And so there are changes happening in the ground. Those people who are queer in politics and power, they only refuse to speak because they are privileged. We know in Ghana people who are queer in presidential areas, you know, but they can't speak, and nobody knows them as queer unless maybe we, the queer community, knows them as queer somehow, you know. But they don't speak, and once they don't speak, the law does not apply to them. But if they are motivated by our visibility and fight, one day they will have the courage to speak out in that powerful position. So this is what I think about hope and change.
Thank you, Vanna. And maybe Maria, if you'd like to add something to this issue of how behavior could foster or contribute to political changes.
Of course, gladly. I think it's very connected to things I already said, and I think this was one of my main points when I talk about queerness as praxis. I will answer it. I will unfortunately need to leave you after this answer, but I think it's important for me to mention when we talk about queerness and behavior, I do agree with some of the stuff that were said, that it's about, is our behavior serving and contributing to the current capitalist hyper-individual status quo or not? And so when I think about queerness, I do say that queerness as praxis, meaning that we don't get stuck in the queer identities as only gender and sexual identities, but it's also, yes, a behavior. It's what we do. It's how we approach the world. It's how we build our relationships. It's how we approach each other as humans. And I see that this is like, when we talk about building other systems, this is what I mean. This is how I see it. It's about starting with our very own circles, our very own intimate relationships, familial, community, societal. And so it's all about how we behave to each other personally in these circles as a community, and then taking that and growing from it and building systems based on that. And so when I think about queerness and behavior, I think it's important to not perceive it as in just the boundaries and limitations of identity politics, of LGBTQ identities, but to also perceive queerness as a practice and as a praxis that is resisting the current status quo, which is built on systems that are very oppressive, whether to us as queer people, as Black people, as indigenous people, as people of color, as working class. And that's it mainly. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Maria. I could go on with several questions I've noted here, but we're running out of time, so I'll make just one more so we can open for you. And I think one thing that really caught my attention is how you all connect like the discussions about gender and sexuality with very structural questions like capitalism and labor division and so on. And that's the whole point, how power relations are established through gendering and racializing people. And Lucy has talked about her text, Beyond Representational Justice, which was published at this magazine, Text für Kunst. And it's quite interesting because on the text, somehow you nods to your conditions of labor in the magazine and how they are asking you to talk about trans perspective in the trans edition. And on one hand, it's pretty brave of them to publish the text. On the other hand, it kept me thinking about how you have this kind of constrained visibility that the art system creates for queer people nowadays. That's calling us just to talk about queerness. On the other hand, it's pretty important to be in these spaces and fostering the debate and so on. So I would like to hear from you all, how do you deal with this kind of constrained visibility, with this kind of restricted way of dealing with this that sometimes does not really changes how we can act inside this artistic structure. So I think we can follow the same order. Maybe Lucy, you could start?
Yeah. How do I respond to this? I mean, I think one interesting question is who benefits from my visibility? Yes? For this gig, I'm being paid 500 euros. And I spend 3 nights in a hotel nearby, and I'm being told that every night in the hotel costs 250 euros. So literally, so the hotel gets more money than I get. From my visibility, the hotel is not on the stage. It's a beautiful hotel. I'm not complaining, okay? It's a beautiful hotel. I love Venice. I love you guys. Thanks for inviting me. But you see my point, yeah? You see my point. It's not a queer hotel. I was dead named and misgendered, in the first 20 minutes that I was there. Okay? The conditions of hospitality are questionable. Who benefits from the visibility? And I think my move that I'm making here right now is the exact same move that I made with Texte zur Kunst, right? I said, you can exploit me, but I'm going to tell them that you are exploiting me. And I'm not saying, Texte zur Kunst, they exploits me and they are bad or something like that, right? I mean, that's the market, right? To run an art institution like this, to do the amazing work that they do. They need to run on a budget, and the budget is low, and it's the market, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not saying it's this actor or that actor, I'm not saying it's this hotel or that hotel that gets this money or that money, right? We're living in age of like capitalistic exploitation, and capitalistic exploitation means that you always need to like decrease the cost, and that like puts everything in a crisis mode, so everything is always curb surfing the disaster, and that like brings about these conditions. But I do think it's important to be open about this and to display it, which I don't think is going to change anything necessarily. I mean, it could, maybe, it'd be nice. But I think that for me, it's at least an interesting question and task how you can use this visibility. So my impression is, like people often invite me and they want me to like be the crazy trans and queer philosopher on stage. And when I'm off stage, they want me to be a bourgeois subject and be nice and eat chocolate cake and like babies and like be nice to animals and like these kinds of things. And I'm not. And then people are really confused. And they're like, how come you're like the critical critic on stage, and then when you get off stage, you're still the critical critic? What is this? Or they're confused because they think, because they want me to, and that was the case there, and maybe it's the case here. I don't know. I'm not sure if I just made friends or not. But like people think like, yes, you can like go there and like criticize all these things, but don't talk about like the condition that you are under, that you are living under right now. Don't address the institution, and that's what I'm not willing to do. I think we need to like build different institutions. I have a few ideas about this. I like to talk and think about this, but in order to do that, I think we also need to stop to cater to the bourgeois theater of visibility, where we meet each other as if we were equal. Vabene and I are not equal. Like, that's just not true. We can pretend that that's true, but like that's not true. And curators and artists and theorists and we're just not equal. We shouldn't pretend that we are. And I think in that catastrophe, that we have to meet each other outside of this like bourgeois fantasy of equality. If we can make that, if we can live there, if we can live inside that problem and feel that out and meet each other there, I think maybe then something else can happen. And I think it's like similar to what I tried to say about like the unpresentation or the unrepresentation that I said earlier. Like maybe one step can be to display at least to each other and meet each other and say like, yes, this shit is real.
Thank you. Barak, want to start?
I have to ask to repeat your question because I was so busy not spilling any water while you asked your question, and I'm kind of mesmerized by your answer. So I have to still think about it. Or if Asya wants to share something, you can start also.
If you like to start, okay.
Then I can add something.
No, but I was going to ask you to, can you simplify the question for me?
Yeah, it's a tricky question, in fact. I'm sorry, guys. But it's basically how to deal with this kind of constrained visibility art system gives to queer people, and how to deal with that, and how to react to that, participating in that. That's the point,
Can I think about it just
Okay, no worries. You want to maybe pass to Vabene and then we go back to you guys? Thank you, dear.
Yeah, thank you. For me, just as we have all seen that such kind of visibility are very tricky, for me it's a reclamation. It's about taking the stage and make it your own. There is a saying that if the mountain will not go to Moses, then Moses will go to the mountain. Until when will people learn about what is happening in Ghana? So for me, accepting and taking such kind of stage, even has nothing to do with how much you are going to pay me. If I am accepting any invitation, money is the last thing to think about. My first priority is, why do I want to tell these people this story? Yeah, so in that context, I always understand and I believe and acknowledge that someone accepted such kind of visibility, whether as an exploitation, whether being naive, whether being whatever, and that has extended a privilege to me today to be here as a black person speaking in Europe. Many years ago, it wouldn't be possible for a black person to sit in seats with white people, no matter how the condition might be. Even if you are sick as a white person and you know that the doctor is a black person, you prefer to die than to be taken care of by a black doctor. You can imagine those days. And then all of a sudden, people took position, people took some steps, people died for it. And then some people allowed to take certain stage that was very toxic to be able to speak out. And that's the same shoe some of us are stepping into. Even I go to places that I know the people are very homophobic, they are very transphobic. But as a token, let us invite one trans person to talk. I'm aware, but yes, I want to take that position and actually kick that transphobic mindset, even in you, the one inviting me first. I know I go to places where they invite, and you can see visibly how racist the people are. But yes, this program wouldn't be successful if there is no one black person, So let's bring one black person. I'm aware. And then I want to take that position that you think you are offering me a privilege. But I don't see that you're offering me just a privilege. I see that I'm taking the space. Like I said, I was a pastor, I was a preacher. So I want to take the stage and preach. There is a difference between being a, a drag queen on the stage and a trans person in your house. People applaud and will celebrate the drag queen on the stage. But the same people are not willing to deal with the trans person. You perform on stage as a trans person and as a drag queen, and then you walk to the washroom, and you go to the female washroom, and the audience are asking, oh, should you be here? But they were here to watch you and witness you. And so you can see the difference. And this is the stage I like to take. Thank you.
Thank you, Vabene.
Can I add one sentence?
Of course.
I just remember what you said earlier, right? Like that when you're in Berlin, you're not afraid. You're not afraid of like being seen as trans, but as seen as black. And I think this is an important information to like plug in here as well, right? Like, okay, we have limited visibility, but visibility as what? What do people see? Like, sometimes I have the feeling, like I'm on a stage, I do the philosophy game, and they see like a trans person who can talk. And that's what they get away with. And that's not enough, Like, and it's very like conscious choice then, what do you wear, how do you talk, what do you talk, and what do you not talk about? So my impression is like, it's very difficult also to like work with a particular audience because you know what they see, or you like have a fantasy of what they see, and you try to like, work that as your artistic material, so to speak, like a sculptural thing, and that's always very, very, very particular.
Yes. Would you like guys to add something?
I was thinking almost the same things. Like, that first of all, I'm not sure if I'm exist as a queer, but I think first I perceived as a Middle Eastern person. I mean, whenever I say like where I'm coming from. So when I'm speaking or trying to, telling about these experiences, I think I'm trying to avoid to people pursue as like, oh my God, oh, you're living in such a harsh place, and they kind of feel bad about you, but it's not the thing because you're actually, powerfully trying to express yourself and just exist and be yourself. So I don't know, like before, after the foundation invited us here, and we are trying to prepare our presentations with Jian. And like, first we started to kind of, mention about the state and the oppression, but, naming the state a lot in the presentation. But then we thought that, okay, they don't give us to advertise. They don't give us money to advertise their names, so we're not going to mention their names, but, we're going to mention about the place where we feel powerful, maybe. Yeah.
Thank you. Maria, would you like to... Is Maria there? No, not anymore. Okay. So, guys, I think we're not like with a lot of time. Would you like to make a question? You're from the audience. Is there anyone who had elaborated an issue that could be answered in very quick 5 minutes? No? Anyone? Okay, so thank you guys for the presence. Thank you
wait. Can I add something else?
Okay.
Sorry. I just thought about this visibility thing again, and like, of course, like, just to like add another layer. So like, my previous question was like, visible as what? And the other question is visible to whom, right? And there is, I'll just say 2 sentences and then I'm done. And there is this like, and what we're facing, at least in Europe and the United States, is this like, this idea that's like becoming more and more intensified, that there is this like big trans lobby, like international conspiracy that like tries to like get at your children and like groom them into like pedophilic networks and like this kind of stuff. And these people are very invested in political offices. These people are very invested in crafting actual laws and like bombing parliaments with these laws and trying to get them through. And these people, they look very carefully at like who's doing what, where, and whose presence they can exploit, like whose unfortunate mishaps on a stage, whose text that was like written like 50 million years ago that like can now be reread in this or that direction can be used to blackmail people and stuff like that, right? Like, so our audience, unfortunately, is not just, like friendly, liberal, lefty, like curators and artsy people, Our audience is also fascists that have a very clear agenda, and that agenda is to blackmail us out of existence. In a crazy conspiracy framework that does have structurally anti-Semitic tendencies, because if you like compare, 1930s anti-Semitic narratives to like anti-trans narratives today, is pretty similar. And my impression is like that is something that like on this like institutional level, like why do we need institutional power, is important to keep in mind. It's not like maybe some of us will run for office, maybe some of us will like get institutional power or will not get institutional power. If we don't get it, they will get it, and they have the winning hand right now, right? I just wanted to like re-emphasize that we're not just visible to our friends, we're also visible to our enemies, and our enemies are looking very closely, and they're moving fast, and that's why I think institutional power and like transforming institutions, rethinking institutions, especially while AI and media revolution is already revolutionizing institutions in a very bad way. So that's why I think the artistic task of like reinventing political institutions is totally key. Thank you.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, guys, for your presence. Thank you all for your different perspectives. It was pretty enriching, and I think there are several questions that could go on from here. And thank you for the team from the Biennale, and that's it. Thank you all.